Hello everyone, this is Trackpad Artist, and welcome back to our continued exploration of Ryng. Last week, we returned our focus onto the specifics of Ryng's magic system, looking into one of its most polarizing orders, the Abstract. In doing so, we explored abstract magic's abilities and limitations, as well as its relationship with the larger world, looking into society's views and regulations imposed upon it. This week, however, we'll be looking into another magical aspect of Ryng, which, as decided by you, will be our first of many explorations into Ryng's magical wildlife. Over these next few minutes, we'll look into two specific species of creature, the Moskur and the Skordalli. But before we get into that, let's talk about how creatures came to use magic in the first place. Unlike humans and other sentient races, the beasts and creatures of Ryng have no need of glass within their casting, suffering no noticeable effects to utilizing magic. This is because, unlike humanity, these beasts' bodies have evolved since Ryng's beginning to utilize the arcane, developing many unique traits in order to allow for the efficient casting of magics. This efficient casting, however, often leads beasts of Ryng to be limited to a single order of magic, as rather than casting through a cognitive intent, as humanity does, these beasts cast through generational instinct. Such a habit prevents most creatures from being able to use the magics they have access to in unique ways, often limited by their low intelligence when compared with mankind. The Faelgrun, an animal previously discussed on this channel in our video The Story of Kalnar, is one such example. A creature of magic and muscle, horn and hoof, strength and awe, the Faelgrun, commonly referred to as the tree fellers, are large quadrupedal mammals which scale their mountainous habitats with great hooves upon their feet. Similar to moose in their size and stature, these bovines sport great horns upon their thickly plated skulls, evolved to sustain the great impacts that earned these creatures their shorthand name. In order to sustain themselves within the harsh cold of Ryng's mountain peaks, the Faelgrun topple the great coniferous trees of their habitat, feasting on their nutrient-dense sap within the trees' upper branches. Toppling such trees, however, is impossible, even with the Faelgrun's impressive strength. As such, the Faelgrun's straight horns, which run up their heads, are laden in near-microscopic grooves and patterns, which absorb and convert the energies of kinetic impacts into potential energies. These potential energies, stored within the horns, are then released when the Faelgrun next strikes, releasing a mighty blow of kinetic power, one strong enough to topple these primordial trees. Such a relationship with its habitat, where the Faelgrun's toppling of trees not only feeds itself, but spreads the cones of these great trees to sprout in new places, allows for their habitat to remain rich and full of life. In taking this creature as one of many examples, the Faelgrun utilize kinetic magic. However, in developing the traits necessary to cast such magics, they have no features allowing for the casting of any other orders. This is a phenomenon present within almost all of Ryng's magical species, which, rather than develop a versatile proclivity to the differing orders of magic, will instead specialize in a single order, to be used within a specific context. Another creature that does a great deal for its habitat are the Skordalli, large insectoid creatures that when fully mature can grow to be upwards of 3 feet long from head to abdomen. In addition to their impressive size, the Skordalli sport a thick, chitinous exoskeleton, greatly increasing their defensive capabilities. This, coupled with their mantis-like heads and mandibles, allows the Skordalli to fend for itself in an offensive stance as well. Rather than the traditional 6-legged body structure of most insects, the Skordalli bear 2 pairs of long legs, used for locomotion, while a smaller pair of limbs at their midsection are used to manipulate their surroundings, akin to primitive hands. These features, however, are generally limited to Skordalli drones, the most abundant of their species, leaving Skordalli males and queens to grow upwards of 5 feet in length. This strict division between a Skordalli's sex has led them to develop a strict hierarchy, with each division among their species being tasked with a specific purpose. Functioning similar to ants, bees, and termites, the Skordalli communicate with each other through the release of hormones, coupled with what is theorized to be a primitive spoken language, derived from the clicking of their mandibles. As stated previously, the Skordalli are divided into 3 classes: drones, males, and queens. Drones are akin to the common worker, and as such, have no capabilities to reproduce. Their contributions to the hive include its construction and its defense. In order to do this, Skordalli drones, in addition to their digestive stomach, have a secondary organ used for storing ingested material. This organ, however, isn't used to create energy, but rather alchemically change ingested biomass into a viscous black bile. This alchemical bile, formed within this secondary stomach, is excreted through the mouth, where, when still viscous, a Skordalli drone may shape and mold it with its tertiary limbs. This bile, which after a few minutes exposed to open air comes to oxidize and harden, forms a fragment of the massive hive structures of a Skordalli colony. Instinctual masters of engineering, Skordalli colonies can grow to consist of hundreds of square meters of complex structures, with an even larger and more complex tunnel system beneath the surface. When not expanding their colonies, Skordalli drones use their bile in both offensive and defensive situations, spitting it at predators and prey alike to trap them once it hardens, as well as coating their exoskeletons in trace amounts of bile to provide further protection. Skordalli queens, which can grow to be upwards of 5 feet long, serve only to multiply and rear a colony's young. After reaching maturity, Skordalli males will pin a queen to the ground and encase her legs in bile, sealing her to the colony's throne room. In doing so, the queen can then mate, coming to lay upwards of 5 eggs a day. This constant reproduction, however, requires constant nourishment, at first provided by the queen's consort of males. These males, which have spent their lives consuming as much nutritious material as possible, are then cannibalized by the queen, giving their lives for the queen's and the colony's health. In doing so, however, a queen begins to produce a secondary bile, laced with dense nutrients and vitamins, used to feed both herself and her young. As such, Skordalli bile, as well as the organ that produces it, are both widely coveted by the mercantile and arcane world, for the bile's great lightness and durability, as well as the organ's use as alchemical essence. Furthermore, a queen's bile's dense vitamins and nutrients can be cured to make salves and medicines of incredible effectiveness, which does nothing but bolster the worth of Skordalli resources to an even greater extent. Confronting a Skordalli colony, however, is no easy feat, as Skordalli drones can grow to number in the thousands, and with each of them being fiercely territorial, a heads-on approach becomes near impossible. To this end, Skordalli colonies are typically harvested through the use of fire, as although their bile is incredibly resilient to physical impact, it has a relatively low melting point. The issue found in this hunting tactic is that after being melted, Skordalli bile is unable to harden, and furthermore, a Skordalli's auxiliary stomach is useless when reduced to ash. Still, Skordalli resources fetch an incredible price on public and underground markets, pushing poachers to continue their hunt for these dangerous creatures. Moving away from the Skordalli, another inhabitant of Ryng's diverse ecosystems is the Moskur, a small, blind, pudgy rodent with short, clawed limbs and short brown fur. These little creatures make their home in lush forests and expansive grasslands, feeding on the roots of abundant plant life present within those ecosystems. Being as small as they are, the Moskur's main form of defense is camouflage, using their clawed forelimbs to sift through loose dirt and sediment, burying themselves just beneath the ground. While hidden, Moskers push through the earth towards the roots they eat, navigating their habitat through the vibrations of their environment, sensed by their powerfully sensitive whiskers at the end of their snout. Using this vibration sense, Moskur often attempt to locate predatory threats before they can strike, and rather than remain hidden, often retaliate through a proactive strike against these perceived threats. Although one could consider such creatures defenseless, being no more than 2 inches in size, the Moskur are equipped with powerful cerebral connections, which allows them to employ the use of abstract magics. Instinctual by nature, the manifestation of these abstract magics are rather limited in their scope, however, incredibly effective in their execution. Moskers will establish a mental link with a perceived threat almost as quickly as they perceive them, before stunning their target with an intense noise frequency. Although this stunning attack is often enough to completely paralyze smaller targets for its duration, it can still cause intense pain, nausea, and fatigue within larger targets. As such, most predators will tend to avoid and even flee the den of a Mosker, often deemed not worth the pain for a meal of such a small size. Likewise, arcane poachers often avoid these creatures for similar reasons, as although a Mosker's brain has the capability to be made into abstract essence, their small size often makes such effort not worth the potential profit. Because of this, the Mosker are a generally populous species, even with their physical defenselessness, having very few natural predators, aside from a select few with natural defenses against arcane attacks. Still, these select predators aren't enough to pose any real threat to the Moskur population, even with their solitary nature and slow breeding periods, taking upwards of a year to produce a litter of at most 3 pups. These pups, raised by their mother for the following months, then leave to survive on their own, continuing the Moskur's solitary life cycle. These few creatures, however, are only a hyper-focused look into the expansive world of Ryng's diverse ecosystems and wildlife. Be sure to stick around for future installments where we'll continue to explore new creatures and beasts of Ryng as it's further developed. For now, though, if you have any ideas for animals you'd like to see, or future topics that I should discuss, be sure to leave them in the comments below, or keep an eye out for more polls I'll be releasing throughout the week. Here's a thank you to each of you lovely viewers for your continued support and interest in the world of Ryng. If you liked what you saw, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe for weekly dives into Ryng's world and lore. If you'd like to go a step further in your support of me and my work, please consider becoming a member of this channel either here or on Patreon for access to additional benefits. Such benefits include early releases of ad-free videos, access to exclusive supporter chats within our Discord, live Q&A sessions, and much more. The link to my Patreon, as well as our Discord server, will be in the description. Until next time, this has been Trackpad Artist. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for our next discussion.